This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.
All right, folks, welcome back. Welcome back. We're now in number 2 of this live broadcast. I'm Patrick Henningsen, live and direct here at TNT, today's News Talk. Extremely good conversation and analysis from Dr. Zachary Foster in the first hour. If you missed any of that, it was an absolute masterclass, and we went through some of the more difficult arguments surrounding this issue, and Zach just really kind of put it all into perspective in a way that very few can. We really appreciate his analysis and his commentary and for being available on that. And big thank you to our team at TNT for arranging that great conversation. Certainly those are the types of conversations that we want to keep having on these very, very tough issues. And we do that consistently on this program. We do that for you, our listeners, for you, our viewers, because we think you deserve the very best in terms of real, factual, and hardcore, hard-hitting analysis, even if it's unpopular with some people out there. Certainly those in the mainstream and mainstream politics do not like the conversations that we are having on this program and more broadly on TNT, today's News Talk, because it has the potential to disrupt the consensus. And listen, if you're in journalism or media and you're not in the business of disrupting the consensus, then you got to ask yourself, what are you doing? What are you doing in media and journalism to begin with? Okay, perfect example. That man in the dock in the Royal Courts of Justice in London this week, Julian Assange, is a big-time disruptor, and he has disrupted the consensus on some of the biggest stories on the planet during his career, and as founder of WikiLeaks, as editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks, held in arbitrary detention by the UK and the United States government for the last 13 years. He's fighting for his life. He's fighting for his freedom. And he's just really doing it because he believed, well, he got into this to begin with. He believed that the people had a right to know. The people had a right to know the truth. It's as simple as that. People have a right to know the truth, to be well informed. If we are supposedly democracies, because how often are we told, oh, this is a democracy? We're democracies. We're not like the Chinese. We're not like those Russians, those autocrats. No. We're a glorious, free democracy in the United States, in Europe, in the EU, in Britain, the foundation of the birthplace of democracy, we're told. We hold these values to be true and self-evident. No, you don't. Maybe at one point you did, but you don't anymore. Because if you're defending the political imprisonment of an award-winning journalist like Julian Assange, and you're not if you're not speaking out against it, but there's others doing worse. They're shilling for him to be extradited and then locked up and have the key thrown away for the rest of his waking years. There's those who are doing that. They want to see him hung, drawn and quartered, figuratively. Well, maybe more than that. Who knows? We're dealing with some insane people here. The same type of insane people, the same type of intellectually challenged. I'm going to rephrase that. That's a bit mean. No, reality challenged. They struggle with reality. They struggle with reality. These same types of people that believe that somehow, by some force and some magic, that the Russians shoehorned Donald Trump into the presidency in 2016. You might laugh. Certainly, if you're watching or listening to TNT, you're just laughing right now. You say, who could be that stupid to believe it back then? But worse, who could be that stupid to still believe it 8 years later? Really? Do you really want to know the answer to that question? If you look at the polling, it is almost half of America. Half of America still believes that Vladimir Putin put Donald Trump into power in 2016 to defeat Hillary Clinton. Almost half of Americans believe that. So it's a real indictment of where Americans' heads are at. How many people believe that in Europe? Probably much less, a little more realistic in Europe. In the UK, probably a bit less, but the government's going to go along with it, because they deploy those same talking points in order to build up their authoritarian Orwellian national security state. They rely on these mythological tales of Russian interference in Western democracy in order to provide the funding and the pretext to build up their police states at home. It's as simple as that. And the police states are very lucrative. Let's be clear. Let's be honest. They're very, very lucrative. There's a lot of money and profits to be turned for that. So I'm just laying it out, ladies and gentlemen, as it is. Now let's shift gears right now. I want to bring Basil Valentine, our roving correspondent for all things in the world, joining us on the live link right now. Basil, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Patrick, and good afternoon, good morning to our listeners all around the world.
I was just having a general rant, Basil. I apologize. Sometimes it really overcomes me, the insanity that we're witnessing right now. I really can't believe some of the things that I'm seeing being said, especially in the halls of government. That is just really unbelievable. And at the same time, they're waxing lyrical about their democratic bona fides at a time like this. It is really extraordinary.
Oh, I agree. It's completely unprecedented in our lifetimes for the sheer scale of the horror we're witnessing. I mean, the pictures, particularly from northern Gaza, thousands of starving people chasing after aid trucks while dodging bullets. It's the most hellish scenario imaginable. And yet the United Kingdom's House of Commons can't even bring itself to set before itself a motion calling for an immediate and total ceasefire. We heard from some MPs yesterday talking about children being shot in the head by snipers. That was based on the testimony of a returning American doctor who wrote a notable piece for the Los Angeles Times. I don't know if you saw that, saying that what he witnessed was not war but annihilation. He was quoted by some MPs during the debate. But MPs remained unmoved, perhaps because 95% of those MPs who spoke in yesterday's debate, we can come on to the various motions that were put before the House of Commons in a moment, but 95% of the MPs who spoke were friends of either Conservative Friends of Israel, members of either Conservative Friends of Israel or Labour Friends of Israel, both organisations directly tied to the Israeli embassy. So the same applies to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, although who behaved absolutely disgracefully and with any luck will resign within a matter of hours or days. Nobody can have any confidence in him. He can be found pictured wearing the flak jacket, bulletproof vest on a recent trip to Israel. So he's totally compromised, as is Starmer, as we know. But I digress. Yes, you could sum it up really, Patrick, particularly with the absolutely disgusting behaviour of the man masquerading as Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, as the British establishment's war on the Palestinian people. It's as simple as that. Welby refused to meet Pastor Munter, a cleric from effectively the Episcopalian Church, the same church theologically as the one that Welby claims to represent. Welby refused to meet Pastor Munter because he had shared a platform with Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, this really, really beggars belief. In other words, Welby, without any evidence at all, has swallowed whole all the smears and lies about Corbyn, a lifelong anti-racist campaigner. He swallowed the lies whole. He obviously believes that Corbyn is some kind of anti-Semite to the extent that he will not only not share a platform with Corbyn, but refuses to share a platform with the clergyman because the clergyman shared a platform with Corbyn calling for a ceasefire. In other words, Welby is a supporter of genocide. That's why I say he is simply masquerading as Archbishop of Canterbury. He was only too happy to share a platform with the chief rabbi in the run-up to the 2019 election, denouncing Corbyn and the Labour Party as anti-Semitic an entirely evidence-free assertion. The chief rabbi now, of course, is referring to the IDF, the murderous Israeli occupation forces, as our troops, and is full-throated in his support of the genocide. The rabbi obviously owns Welby, and Welby he's worse than a coward. Welby, he's an abomination. He has no business being in that position at all.
Hold on for a minute. Let me get this straight. I'm a little bit confused. So, the man who's ostensibly closest to God in Britain, constitutionally third in line for head of the country of Britain. Okay, the Archbishop of Canterbury, basically is snubbing a Christian pastor who is a top sort of religious figure, Christian figure in the Middle East, okay? The birthplace of Christianity, by the way. I know this might seem like crazy, but actually Christianity, I'm told anyway, Basil, my history gets rusty sometimes, but I'm told that Christianity comes from Bethlehem, that it comes from Palestine. That's what I've been led to believe all these years. I didn't realize it was Lambeth where Christianity was invented. But anyway, I digress. So he's Father Munter is talking about the suffering, the subjugation of Christian Palestinians, as well as Muslims. But just take the Christian piece. He's been highlighting this: the persecution of Christians, the desecration of churches, the targeting of churches and holy sites by the Israeli military. Okay, he's been highlighting this, and he's being considered persona non grata by the Archbishop of Canterbury. What happened to Christianity first? Or is that no longer relevant?
I can't speak for Welby. He's a total disgrace. I will, however, quote the Reverend Dr. Munter Isaac, the man in question, last Sunday at Bloomsbury Central Baptist Church in London. He made an uncompromising call to UK churches. He said that they are called to be the church and to act in costly solidarity towards an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. This is a moral obligation. This is not the time for neutrality or soft diplomacy. He was building on his Christmas sermon, Christ in the Rubble, a liturgy of lament. But it seems Welby takes a different view. He seems to be supporting the ongoing genocide. We have had no meaningful public statement from him. To the contrary, he needs to be, if he wants to redeem his reputation at all, he needs to make an immediate, full-throated endorsement of Dr. Munter Isaac's remarks. Anything else, and he must resign from office.
Listen, if I'm not a man of the cloth, Basil, as you know, but if I could give my sermon this Sunday at whatever church in Britain or anywhere else in the world, it would start like this. It was very simple, Basil. It would start like this. To my Christian parishioners, I would say, the devastation in Gaza. What would Jesus do? ... Fill in the blanks. That's it. It's as simple as that. Why is this a struggle for Christians in the West? This is the big question, Basil.
Well, it shouldn't be, and no one of any conscience or ethics has any difficulty in seeing the very, very clear moral picture with regard to what's happening in the Middle East. But Welby is completely compromised. It's important that people know, and I'm quoting here from the rapper Loki online, who posted the following information on X earlier today. Welby's involvement with the Israeli government through his role as president of an organization called the Council for Christians and Jews, the CCJ, which of course sounds innocuous enough. And like a lot of these organizations and like a lot of these, so-called fronts for peace, they are in fact simply ways of making the occupation and the genocide acceptable by sort of pretending that really we're sort of seeking reconciliation and all the rest of it, when in fact all you're doing is legitimizing the occupation and the oppression of the Palestinian people. Welby is president of the CCJ, which, according to its own reports, takes people on tours of occupied Palestine, where they visit illegal Israeli settlements and meet with Israeli government officials. The CCJ also works with one of Israel's national institutions, the United Jewish Israel Appeal, which has been found to take students on trips to illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The head of Israel engagement at the UJIA, the United Jewish Israel Appeal, has described Welby's organization as carrying out pioneering work. He's also involved with the Abraham Initiatives, which claims it exists to increase synergy between the UK and Israeli bodies and agencies. So, when you add it all up, Welby is far closer to the Israeli regime than he is to Christ.
Well, if it's about promoting the teachings of Jesus Christ and what's right, what's wrong, what's morally correct to do, what should one do with respect to your religion, your scriptures, the Ten Commandments, just as a starting point, it really seems like this. When we look at the religious leaders, I mean, God love him, Pope Francis was a bit late to the game, but he arrived eventually. He arrived, made sweeping condemnations of what Israel's doing in Gaza. It took him a few months, granted, but he arrived. But I don't see any excuse for anybody else at this point, Basil, that's dragging their heels on this, saying, well, the wringing of the hands, as they say, Basil, it's never more prevalent than in Western Christendom.
I've said my piece about Welby. I only hope we can get a petition or something together to get him unseated, frankly, because he's a total disgrace to the office he pretends to hold. But as you said in your preamble, Archbishop of Canterbury is a very senior position within the UK establishment. Although King Charles is nominally head of the Church of England, Welby is the de facto head of the church in England, and I, for one, would not dream of going anywhere near any Church of England establishment while he remains at its head. He not only needs to resign, he needs to be publicly pilloried for his abysmal stance. The other aspect of the United Kingdom establishment's war on the Palestinian people, of course, was the mucky political deal that Keir Starmer and Speaker of the House Lindsay Hoyle got together last night in order to prevent the Scottish National Party exercising their constitutional right to put a motion before the House of Commons. Instead, Hoyle put before the House the much watered down Labour amendment. And he's now claiming today that he did so because he wanted a motion to pass that would basically mean that MPs were not targeted by the angry mob of ceasefire protesters. Starmer completely mendaciously started claiming that his MPs were being threatened for supporting genocide. What in fact was the case is that his MPs are afraid of losing their seats en masse for supporting genocide. He was also afraid that if the SNP motion was put before the House, it would see a very large rebellion, which he would be unable to contain, and that would undermine his leadership. Worth noting, of course, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, that both he and Hoyle are fervent supporters of Israel. So at the end of the day, the fact that the proper motion, which mentioned collective punishment, you see, the original SNP motion talked about how the Palestinians were suffering collective punishment, which is true, of course. But Starmer didn't want that presented to the House of Commons, didn't want to see large numbers of his MPs voting for that motion, because it's claimed he would subsequently find it embarrassing having to deal with Benjamin Netanyahu if large parts of his own party embraced that position. I mean, you really can't make this stuff up, Patrick. It's obscene.
So hold on. Not accountable to the British voter constituents. No. Accountable to Benjamin Netanyahu.
That's right. Exactly. Afraid of upsetting his pal Bibi, who, as we know from the ICJ, plausible case, he's committing genocide. A lot of people are hoping that he will also be charged by the ICC, which appears to be finally getting into motion. So obviously, people up and down the country in Britain are absolutely appalled at what's gone on, including a lot of MPs upset more about the fact that procedure wasn't followed than the fact that the people of Gaza have been completely abandoned. Hopefully Hoyle will go, and the fact that Starmer is a totally unprincipled individual has been even further exposed were it necessary.
Absolutely incredible situation, Basil, as it unfolds. So, democracy is really being tested and, quite frankly, failing. This is the issue that's breaking governments right across the West. They cannot bear to break free of this stranglehold that they find themselves under. We talked about the power of the lobby with Dr. Zachary Foster in the first hour. Great conversation, by the way, with Zach. But, this is unprecedented. I mean, I've seen influence operations. We've seen nudging before, Basil. We've seen arm twisting. We have not seen total control of much smaller country controlling the foreign policy of the United States and Britain and Europe. It's really extraordinary, unless this is all what they want as well. Maybe their interests are completely aligned and they just don't like Arabs and Palestinians in Brussels, Washington, and London. Maybe that's it. I'm struggling with this, Basil, really.
Well, it's the product of decades of lobbying, bribery, and blackmail by the Israel lobby to basically capture the vast majority of our elected officials in Washington, in London, in Brussels, in Bonn, in Paris, and so on and so forth, because in no way at all would what's happening to the Palestinian people be considered sort of acceptable anywhere in the Eurasian theatre. This kind of thing goes on in sub-Saharan Africa, perhaps even in Central America or far-flung parts of the world, but anywhere within the sort of greater European sphere of influence, the situation in Gaza would have been prevented from getting this desperate a long time ago. But years and years of dehumanizing the Palestinian people, which continues to this day, has resulted in the current abomination.
Well, we can only pray at this point that somehow the damage is abated, that the lives can be saved at this point. But I really fear for what's coming with this situation building up in Rafah, Basil. And of course, we're going to be right here to give you all of the latest news analysis and updates on that Monday to Friday here on TNT. Go ahead, Basil, before we break.
Well, just the latest sort of today is that apparently Israel is seeking Palestinians not affiliated with Hamas to manage civilian affairs in parts of the Gaza Strip, designed as testing grounds for the post-war administration of the enclave. We first heard this plan back in sort of November or something, about sort of trusted Palestinians, stooges, in other words, and it certainly wouldn't be an authority by the looks of it that covers the whole of Gaza. What they want to do is what they've done in the West Bank, which is break Gaza up into isolated pockets or fiefdoms, probably surrounded once again by high fences, Israeli soldiers, and barbed wire. So basically, a sort of whereas previously the Gaza concentration camp, people could at least roam the length and breadth of it. I think the plan now is to create sort of tiny little concentration camps within the previous concentration camp, surrounded by armed guards.
Isn't that what they call them in prison? The trustees. These are people the warden can trust.
That's right.
To help, delegate and manage the affairs of the prisoners and so forth. Trustees. That's a prison term. We've got lockdowns. We've got trustees. This is all sounding very Orwellian indeed. Unfortunately, especially for the people in Palestine.
The Israeli military. This is being discussed with respect to the Zaytun neighborhood of northern Gaza City. The Israeli military would provide peripheral security. So the people that have murdered 30,000 civilians and maimed tens of thousands more are going to be your guards.
Interesting. Well, how's that working out in the West Bank? Not very well. Very well. Basil Valentine, thank you for joining us on TNT for this very important update. Much appreciated.
This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.